This is ogforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV NFC terminals for countersale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Aldrich Web Solutions. Are you a distributor using Acumatica, yet struggling with an e-commerce fit? US-based Aldrich Web Solutions out of Marion, Illinois, has 2 decades of experience helping distributors find success online. Our team of experts built the integration, creating websites that work effortlessly with Acumatica. With our reputation for swift customer service and meticulous attention to detail, we are the perfect fit for distributors needing online solutions. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. I mean guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, September 22nd, 2023, and this is episode number 112. You can find related links on the episode page at augforums.com/episode 112. Today we're talking with Chris Riegle about crystal reports and Acumatica and anything else that we come up with. Hey, Chris, thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Hey, so before we get started and geek out on crystal reports, I always like to ask the brief origin story of all of our guests. So maybe you could tell us where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you landed in the world of mid-market ERP.
Well, about 20 years ago, I actually grew up in Ohio, not too far from you, actually in Dayton, Ohio. My sister and I began about 20 years ago. She's a CPA. I'm a more technical guy, more SQL database guy. And she was a QuickBooks Pro advisor. And Intuit bought, at the time, it was called Master Builder. So it was construction accounting program. And she decided to sell it, and I joined, 2 of us joined together so she could do the accounting part and I did the technical parts. So that's kind of started our progress from there. So Master Builder was, of course, eventually bought by Sage, which became Sage 100 Contractor. And over the years, we became familiar with other things. The company's grown. So, development staff, we do a lot of technical development integrations. We work with Sage 300. I don't know if I'm allowed to say all this other stuff, but we work, other different construction accounting programs is kind of our primary focus, but also Acumatica as well. So my developers are familiar with it and like the capabilities and flexibility of Acumatica versus some of the other accounting programs that are don't have APIs or are just too cumbersome to work with, just old desktop applications. That seems to be the standard for um, in the industry, especially for construction. I mean, there's a couple of new ones come out here recently. Anybody who's been around for a while knows that all the construction accounting programs are basically old as dirt. So they just don't. They're difficult to work with, especially from our side. With the technical side, we're trying to build integrations, and people get frustrated. Can you build an integration that does this or that? Well, probably, but we're limited in certain aspects and what it can do, and we do what we can. But Acumatica is a different story where we can build nicer integrations with it.
That's cool. I had heard that, I knew Master Builder was acquired by Sage, but I didn't realize that before that it was actually owned by QuickBooks. That's interesting. Learned something there.
Yeah, it was like a few years, but it was owned by Intuit, and then I'm not sure why, but they just decided to sell it off to Sage then. So
Yeah, I've been pretty impressed with Intuit in that they have been very disciplined to stay on the small end of things, right? It seems like everyone else is tempted to just keep going for larger and larger companies. They're pretty disciplined to stay aimed at the small business. Um, yeah, which is not easy, right? Because it's it's easy to just go for bigger fish.
yeah,
But I'm also curious since we talked about Sage a little bit, and feel free to decline responding to this, but I have no contractual relationship with Acumatica, and it doesn't matter to me what we say about it. But I've seen that Sage Intact has been getting into the construction space, and you having some Sage background. What's your take on Acumatica versus Intact in construction?
I ask around all the time to see what other people's thoughts are as well on this, but my understanding that Intact is a little stronger in the financials, which is literally just like the reporting, which okay, that sounds nice and all, but at least for the construction market, I haven't seen too much with it. They just finished their payroll like January of this year, so it's not even really been done. I think Acumatica has had a couple years head start on them. So as you know, in software world, it's hard to get caught up on when you're years behind. So they're still playing catch up on this stuff. So the whole intent of them building a construction edition within Intact, I mean, if you're not familiar, they bought Intact several years ago. Now they're trying to retrofit it for construction with the idea that they want to have a replacement for Sage 300 construction, which is old as dirt. And we work with that one too. It's not my favorite. It's too difficult to work with, but they want their 9,000 customers from Sage 300 to migrate to Intact. So that's why they're investing the time and effort to go into Intact. Maybe it'll be really good. I mean, my developers have checked out the Intact. Um, they are it's a little bit more dated than Acumatica, quite honestly. So it's not terrible. They do have APIs. My understanding is that because I have contacts there that they call me every so often. They keep wanting me to build an integration with them, but we haven't done it yet until we get a customer. But they're supposed to be rewriting their APIs too, so I'm a little bit hesitant to spend a bunch of time learning and creating an integration, and then only have to redo it again with their new set of APIs. So we've been kind of dragging our feet on that intentionally to do with that. But overall, I think they're probably good, strong competitors to each other. But that's the only thing I've ever been able to find out from asking around with the people who I know are familiar with both. That okay, Intact has really good financials, but that's just some reporting, and for the rest of it, like I'm curious that it's just got finished recently, so it's probably still lacking some functionality. Is my guess.
Yeah, that fits with what I've heard, and I think what you said was it could be really good, and I sort of think the same way. I feel like theoretically it makes a ton of sense, right? And that, as you said, Intact has a very strong financial report writer, the way they do their dimensional reporting, and they're really good at aiming at the accountant. And in construction, a lot of it really is just project accounting. It's not that operational, right? And so I could see them doing really well if they could pull it off. I think Sage's problem has always been they're great at acquiring software, they're terrible at developing software. But if they could somehow uh, change what they've done the last several decades and do something different with Intact here and actually be able to develop, then it would make a lot of sense because it's got a solid financial platform, speaks well to accountants. I could still see Acumatica doing better when true inventory gets involved. But it's just accountants and it's project accounting. I think it could be really good. I like how you put that. So thanks for. I always like getting other people's opinions on where that might head with Intact.
I do have a question for you. I get calls every so often for these large investment firms that they buy a construction or multiple construction companies, and that investment firm tells them, here are your three options. You can use, we want you to standardize accounting. We want you to switch to Intact Dynamics, maybe NetSuite. They give them like three options, but it's never Acumatica. And I always suggest, well, what do you think about Acumatica? Well, our investment firm, these are the ones that they really want us to go with, and it's typically Intact. I think that's the primary. So, are you familiar with that, or heard of that, or can you know why maybe Acumatica is not on their radar as for one of the options?
I haven't heard that. That's interesting. I mean, not specifically on construction, but whenever I've seen those situations of an investment firm buys up a company, I personally don't think it makes sense to change the ERP at all. I think it's a BI situation, right? It's all about mapping data and having that consolidated reporting. I don't think you need to have a common set of ERP systems across all your companies. There's always going to be different systems that are better fitted for different companies. And if you're an investment firm, the way you're buying and selling companies, to me, it doesn't make sense to be in the game of ERP, but that's just my opinion. I think it's more of a reporting and business intelligence, consolidated financials game if you're an investment firm.
That could be what the reason being, but most of it, they even flat out tell me that we just got bought out, and they know that they're going to sell it in say 5 years, and in that time that they want everything on a quote standardized accounting makes it a lot easier to then I think maybe to sell the company to some other investment firm with something else that they're familiar with.
Oh, I guess so. The situation you're talking about is they're going to buy up a few companies, combine them together, and sell the combined company.
Yes.
Ah, okay, okay, yeah. Then I understand now. No, that's interesting. I haven't heard anything about that.
It comes up probably about every month. I get a question about that or a call like, what do you know about this or that? And that's
Hmm.
typically the case, some sort of investment firm.
Yeah, I mean, Acumatica has done a lot better in the last few years, but they've always had a visibility challenge, right? Great technology, but not as good visibly. I think they're
Yes.
trying to spend a lot more on marketing now. But yeah, that's I'm a technical guy, so I'm not really that aware of how they do in a visibility level.
Yeah. A lot of
So
people,
cool.
seems like
Oh,
some
sorry, good.
people, yeah, it seems like a lot of people haven't even heard of it when I mention it. That's kind of a common issue. Like, oh, how do you spell it? What is it? I get that
Right.
a lot.
Yeah, my phone still like puts two C's in there when I say Acumatica.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty. I think can't even spell it right. Right. That's pretty common to see a lot of people don't even know how to spell it. Yeah, I agree. It's got a recognition challenge and continues, especially compared to something like Sage, right, which has been
Mhm.
around for so long.
Right.
Yeah, so selling and visibility, that's a challenge, but on the technical side, I like it, and maybe we could switch gears. And you had sent me an email about something related to crystal reports. I don't even remember the details, but maybe you could. It sounded interesting. Maybe you could tell me more about it, and then I'll pepper you with a ton of questions, and we'll have fun geeking out.
Okay. Well, we have a customer who it all started off with some lien waivers where they were using a different program, downloading things into Excel, and they were pulling from Stage 100 contractor. They're a construction company, so they need these lien waivers. And it's if you look at the report, it doesn't look like it's that terribly difficult. They have a whole bunch of subcontracts, And then they also have, so things that are, for work they have subcontracted out, of course. And then they have work that they perform themselves, and they have to provide this to their customer, how much was spent, whatever else, all the totals for this month. We try to build this report out in Acumatica Report Writer. It just got way too complicated trying to summarize this, and then we need totals from a sub report and values for this because we need it to use in another calculation. And you I was working with some other guy, and he's like, if we could use Crystal, this would be so much easier because we're both familiar with Crystal reports. Yeah, you can use formulas within formulas, and you can pretty much do whatever you want in Crystal reports.
Yeah,
And
that's a big one right there. Being able to use formulas within formulas, right? Without
yeah,
having to go to variables, which can be really slow. Yeah, no, I agree.
exactly. So I had my dev team kind of look at it like, can we do something with this? And they started looking at that, and they spent quite a while looking at this, but they did come up with a solution to where, and this is, I think, where it's going to be exciting for you, is we take your normal things that people are familiar with, like just building, general inquiry, create your GI, and there's an option to download the data set as an XML. So that's the part that's most people, I think, in this who are listening to this are probably most familiar with, creating that part. Once you
Can I ask you
download,
real quick on that? You said download a data set as XML. I'm familiar with how to export the definition of the generic inquiry. I'm not sure what you mean by downloading the data set as XML.
there's some
You mean
optional.
the OData? The OData functionality?
Um, there's actually just a button that actually says download data set. So the
Oh,
option is, or it comes down as an XML document.
okay.
And we have our own, what we've done is created a workspace, and we have a couple different options in there. So you can um, create your own data set just by using tables, or if you've already built a GI, you can reference, I want to use this GI. And we also give them an option to include some data. If you want to 5 or 10 records or all of them, it doesn't matter. The advantage is once you download the XML, so that this actual structure, so like the data structure, the tables with the individual fields and the field length and so on, but you can also download some data as well. So when you create your report, you actually set the data source to that XML. And once you're building it out, you don't have to save it, go back and upload it, like what you do right now for Acumatica. You have to upload it, save, refresh your parameters. I mean, there's a lot of work just to see what you work to preview it. Since we have the ability to download some data, you can preview it right there in the Chris reports. If you're familiar with that, there's like the second tab over is preview. So if you create a formula, you click on preview, you're going to know right away if it's right or wrong, or because it's real data that has been downloaded from Acumatica. So that's the big advantage. So like getting back to where I was talking about, we're kind of like picking up where you guys typically end with creating a GI. You download your XML, data set, create your Chris report, and then once you're happy with it, we have an option with our workspace to upload that report. So that actually gets uploaded to our server. And then when you can then run that report from actually Acumatica, even a hosted option. So for those people who are actually hosted with Acumatica, it does work for there. And then you can run it from there, including parameters. And it uses the user, whoever's logged in, uses their security. So once again, we're make sure that we have, not giving out the wrong data to the wrong people. So they can have the run the report, and Acumatica sends over just the data, and it processes the actual report on our server, and we send the report back to them to be displayed within Acumatica. And then you can print it, download it as, CSV, XML, Word, PDF, HTML. We get a couple of, there's like 5 different options. You can, email it, download it, print it, whatever you want to do with it. So it's for the end user of Acumatica, it's totally seamless. So like they don't really know from their side that, oh, this is actually a Crystal report, because you can save or have the report show up under different workspaces. So if it's a finance or banking, whatever, you can have the report show up under there. they have no way of knowing that it's something different because it looks just the same.
So I want to back up to the XML. So I'm going to assume at this point you're talking about OData. Um, then the XML file gets saved somewhere, at
Yeah, you
least
would have
initially.
yeah, you would have to save it onto your local workstation that has Crystal reports.
Okay. And then that's what you use to build the report. Then, though, when you upload the crystal report definition that you came up with to your special area,
Yes.
when I run the report, your instance of crystal is talking to Acumatica directly, or is there some cached data somewhere in between?
It would be directly talking directly. So we parse or basically read through the actual RPT file. So actual Crystal creates an RPT file so we can know the parameters and so on that it's expecting. So from there, you could type in your parameters. If you built them into or Crystal reports, you can do static or dynamic. Those would also show up in there as a drop down list, and then Acumatica just sends, since we know the data set, like the XML, like that's the whole point of like the GI. Like Acumatica knows what to do with that, how to run that, and we just send that data over to our server to actually process it within the RPT file that was uploaded, and then we send that file back, or the results that back over to Acumatica.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like there's no cache data, there's no scheduled refresh. When you run that crystal report, which is embedded in Acumatica, so it's seamless to the user, it's running on live Acumatica data.
Correct. Yeah, we don't get a
Okay.
copy of their data at all. Nothing like that.
Okay. Yeah. So it's probably O data, which, can be in either the XML format or the JSON format. So that makes sense. And I've thought of that years ago as like maybe Crystal could do this, but to me the biggest challenge was, all right, now you got to spin up a Crystal environment. So maybe tell us about, is this something that you're offering like as a service, or is it something you'd help people set up, or how do they get that Crystal cloud environment that they can then embed back into Acumatica?
Yeah, so it is a service, a subscription service that we're offering to add that, customization package into their Acumatica. And then, so that's, you know,
Oh, there's actually a customization project to make this data available.
yes,
Ah, so it's not the regular Acumatica O data. Aha. Okay.
it's all specialized code. So I don't fully get
Okay.
how it works. My developers perform some sort of magic to get it to work.
This is
So
interesting.
I just know that it does
Okay.
work. So that's, I know enough technical stuff. I'm more, I know databases and I know Crystal reports, but they're the ones who handle like the transferring of data and stuff. And I just said, you need to make sure it's secure and nobody can do anything stupid with it. And, we don't want to cache any data because it's too much hassle. We don't do that. So we just literally, we rely on Acumatica to process the data based on that user's ability to see whatever data that might be in that report, and then send it over, and then we send the report back to them to then be
Okay.
decided.
So the service includes the customization project in Acumatica to enable this way of connecting to Acumatica's data. And then it also includes, I assume you're basically a cloud hosting service, like a your own Crystal environment that you're hosting somewhere. Is that right?
Yes, so it's very minimal. It's basically a report file, an RPT file is really small. Obviously, there's some processing capabilities on our hosted server, so it's pretty minimal in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, that's what we're actually selling is that subscription for that customization package, and we do offer Chris reports, building because not everybody, if they have their own person who knows Chris reports, great, you can use them. There's nothing stopping you. Or but if you need somebody to build it, we can help you with that too.
So you mentioned the customization project, the expertise in building the Crystal reports. Isn't there though still a third component? And maybe I'm wrong on this, but don't you need some type of Crystal license to run it in a browser?
No, the we hold the licensing on our server, and since we're sending it back to, it's actually not using the like Chris Reports licensing over there. So like since we build it, I know it's kind of tricky on the licensing, so because you're able to build applications with Crystal Reports and what we do, and but then we're sending it back over there as just I think the final result. So that is okay. So that and then it's displayed over there. So like if we were to
Hmm.
build just a desktop application or even a web application, we use Crystal. Like um, we have a license for that, and then other people could use it, and that is part of that licensing.
Interesting. So the what I'll call the browser. Okay, so I'm dated on Crystal. I'm like 10 years old on Crystal. I haven't touched Crystal in about 10 years. So you're going to have to catch me up.
Okay.
What I recall with Crystal is that the RPT file is the definition of it, like an RPX file in Acumatica's report designer. So you define it in an RPT file, but then you still need a way to run it. And 10 years ago, I was just running it in a Windows application because it was a Windows ERP that I was working with. With Acumatica, it's in the browser. So you need some like URL to be able to drop that URL into Acumatica, I would assume. So you is it your own special thing that's displaying the results in a browser format, or is it a standard Crystal feature that does that?
Um, I would have to ask my developers for exactly how it works. I'm not sure. I know that I'm
Okay.
looking at it now that I think they just send over the final HTML or the results that somehow it's able to display in Acumatica as is, like totally formatted, like you would see just in Crystal, and then there's options to export or print or
Okay.
email from there.
Interesting. Yeah. So, um, SaaS subscription, um, you get to use your Crystal skills and the extra functionality that Crystal has. You're still running on live data. Maybe talk to me about performance. Have you done any reports that are consuming a lot of data? How's the performance been?
It does take a little, obviously, like with any report, it does take a little bit longer, but so far the performance has been okay. It does take a little while to like send the data over and process it and send it back, but I mean, it's a reasonable amount given like what you're getting for it in return.
Yeah, and I would think that Crystal strength is the what you see is what you get printable version of reports, right? Where it's pixel perfect and you're placing things exactly where they need to go. And a lot of times when you're doing that, you're not consuming a lot of data to do that. It's like you're looking at one invoice or one transaction, right? It's not like consolidated reporting type of a situation. Is that what you tend to see?
Right. And the advantage of us using the GIs, which could include even custom DAX, whatever you want to do, the bulk of the processing, if you will, like the data processing actually happens on the Acumatica server. So they're just giving
Right.
us the result set. So if you specify a parameter or like this month or this particular record or these records or 100 records, Acumatica's processing defined all that data, and they just sends over 10 records or one record, whatever, over to us. We process that within Crystal to generate that report and then send it back. So we're not querying you know 40,000 invoices, and I mean you're not sending that huge whole data set back over of
Right.
the invoices and all the invoice lines. I mean you're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of records. We don't want all that. All that processing is done within Acumatica, and then it just sends over that result set, which should be substantially smaller, just like some sort of particular criteria, whatever you specify.
That makes sense. Yeah. So that's cool. Let's see. I just thought of a question. I lost it. What about scheduling reports? Can you do scheduling delivery of reports?
Yes, you can. So we
Okay.
try to think of everything. So yes, you can schedule the reports, and that includes different parameters, such as if you had a daily report, maybe you have 10 different project managers. They each get a copy of their jobs that they are managing. So they don't want to see everyone's jobs. They just want to see theirs. You can specify, we want this report to go at 8 a.m. for this particular project manager, and then you create another schedule report for a different parameter for a different project manager. So we use the same scheduling tool. It's the exact same one that's already in there, so they know, you know, who the different options, daily, weekly, month, whatever, all those options. We just took care of the same, um, use the same options within Acumatica for the scheduling.
Oh, and is the scheduling using the actual Acumatica scheduler, or it's your scheduler? You just duplicated the options.
I think we're actually using the actual Acumatica scheduler, but
Oh,
you
okay.
select our report, and that part of that includes a kind of like a settings, and the settings is where you specify the parameters and also the format. So you can specify this person wants a PDF or a CSV, whatever the format is. Um, that's also part of the settings. So like when it's scheduled out, like tomorrow at 8 a.m., this person wants a PDF, this person wants a CSV or whatever. You can do that.
Interesting. Can you publish to an FTP site, or like what's the scheduled delivery options? Is it just email, or can it be sent out somewhere else?
Whatever's already in and I can't remember off the top of my head what's in the scheduling options. Right now, it's just off the top of my head, it's just the emailing, unless they have a FTP option there. You may be able to tell me if you remember what's in their scheduler or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on which specific screen. I'd love to learn more about that because, um, in like a data interchange situation, a lot of times you need to just send a file to some FTP location, right, for it to get processed. And you can do that with Acumatica and export scenarios, but it's a real headache, I think. So that would be interesting if you could do that.
What type of file formats would that typically happen if you want an FTP? You know,
Like a CSV. Yeah, when you said CSV, that's what made me think of it.
okay. We typically for some of our other stuff, we import the same thing you're talking about. Like a lot of payroll companies, they can only do, for some reason, they can only do FTP. And like a site where they export a CSV file, but I will check into that to see what our options are for if we can do that. If
Yeah,
not,
and it might not be a great use case for Crystal. The more I'm thinking about it, because again, I think Crystal's strength is the printable report. That really nice looking pixel perfect report. I think that's its
right.
bread and butter. No, but that's cool. When I used to teach the report designer class at Acumatica, I guess 7 or 8 years ago at this point, I taught it a few times, and I eventually I got pretty confident on this because what I would tell people is, this was 7 or 8 years ago, and there weren't as many people who knew Acumatica, and so a lot of people were just spinning up a consulting practice and trying to port over their existing skills to Acumatica, and they would ask me about Crystal. And my ballpark gut feel was take your Crystal reports estimate, like number of hours that you think it would take to build whatever report, and multiply it by two to build it in Acumatica's report designer. And I had a number of people come back to me and say, you know what, that was exactly like, not exactly, but that was pretty much what it took. So I think it's interesting that someone followed through on delivering Crystal for Acumatica, and it makes sense to me that it came from someone who's into construction because you have a lot of these types of forms in construction, right? And so I think it's really cool. And if you have a company out there using Acumatica or about to implement, and you've just got a ton of forms that need to be designed, I think that is a significant factor to consider. If you take your estimate and know you can divide it by two approximately on your labor to create the reports, that can be very significant if you have a lot of reports to create. And then you're just dealing with the SaaS cost in order to continue to run those reports. But you can get them up a lot faster, right?
Yes. Yeah. Anybody who's familiar with Crystal and, um, you know, it, I use the Acumatica report writers to some extent, watched other people. It seems very cumbersome and just saving and uploading back to, or, saving back to Acumatica, and just a preview just takes forever. So I can see where like the time, why it is double and typically. So like, I think we cut down quite a bit on that. If you're familiar with Crystal, and the fact that you can preview it like right there without having to like you know save it and go back in Acumatica. You just build it right there, check all your stuff. If you're happy with it, upload it, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and in Acumatica's defense, they do have the preview button in Report Designer now. I still don't really use it because I just find it's easier for me to just save Alt Tab back and run it. But I think the other issue with it is I think you have to default your parameter values. It doesn't just let you specify new parameters when you run it. If I am remembering correctly, so I think part of me just doesn't trust that it's going to render it exactly the way that Acumatica does, whereas Crystal's preview is much more comprehensive. But Acumatica does have the feature, so I had to defend it a little bit there, I guess.
We have seen it. It when we tried it, and it didn't quite do. I think it kind of gives you like a general layout, but it's not exactly. And I don't know that formulas actually execute. I think it was more of just like there's
Oh,
some.
interesting.
I think there was some issue. Like you could see the text boxes, and like okay, well that's well and good, but like I'd like to really get a good feel for what you're doing, and that was our issue when we were trying to do all these subcontracts and adding up values, whatever else. Like, okay, well, how do we know if this value is actually correct? Like, we
Gotcha.
had to go back and accurate. We could have been doing it wrong, but I think that was like one of the limitations that we found. Like, yeah, it does display some rendering, and it um, wasn't quite as precise as what we needed it to do because you're looking trying to line things up by it's a very structured formatted report with lines and boxes, and it didn't quite render it on the preview.
Okay. No, that fits with what I've seen. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, so you can cut down your development time by using Crystal, and yeah, no, that's cool. I don't know if you can throw out ballpark pricing on your SaaS product. No pressure to do that.
Well, we've already mentioned that. I mean, I I did want to mention. I think having something seamless in. We have another customer who's really interested in this. Um, they're downloading stuff into Excel, and kind of defeats the purpose of having Acumatica. Why do you have an online accounting program if you're downloading stuff into Excel and manipulating data because it's already outdated? And even if you email it, and then what happens? Somebody adds a new invoice, and now that report is now outdated. So if you want to rerun it again, you have to download it again. It just got to be too cumbersome for that. So I think for our introductory price, I'm thinking like $5,200 a year, so $100 a week.
And would you be licensing the Acumatica instance and just unlimited users following Acumatica's licensing, or
Yes.
okay? So per URL, basically.
We're still thinking about the pricing, but that's kind of like a
I
ballpark
like
figure.
that's what
About
I
50.
would prefer. Yeah,
So
Belixo does it that way, and they're the most popular third-party add-on. Um, the Aug SQL product that I've been working on, we're doing it by instance. I think that's the way to go. Then
yeah,
you get the advantage of the unlimited users, and you're just fitting in with Acumatica's pricing model.
correct. Yeah. So we don't want to get into number of reports or users, anything like that. It's just like, it's there. You can use it as much as you want. You know, Somebody may come along and say, we only have one report that's too complicated, but we'll see.
Yeah, that makes sense. You start with the instance, and I know Velixo eventually went to they would follow the Acumatica licensing tiers because that tells you volume of data. At least it gives you if you wind up processing a lot more reporting on your end, there's a cost associated with that. But start with the instance, and then you could break it out by the large, the medium, the small. If that's still how they do it,
Yeah,
um,
that
you could
price
follow
was for
that.
the medium. I guess I assume the standard. Most people on the medium.
Cool. Do you have some like screenshots you could send over or demo video, something I could put in the related links on the episode page?
Yeah, soon enough we're just finishing up some stuff for our website. We're gonna have a video out there and some literature for people
Nice.
to download. So yeah, we're very close to getting all this stuff out there.
And you said you have how many Acumatica customers who are actually using this?
So far, we only have two, but
Okay, that's a good start. Oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah, and with reporting, it's not like uh, it's not like you have to go accommodate a bunch of use cases that you didn't think about, right? It's not like that third and fourth customer all of a sudden going to be doing some weird things. As long as you're getting Crystal to run in Acumatica for a couple of people so far, it's going to work for other people as well, right?
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. It's just more of a kind of a difficult thing for people to like grasp. If you're talking to a CFO or something, like, well, why do we need Crystal? Like, well, the report writer is missing some functionality, so you'll know when you need it, kind of a thing. So that's more of a, um, you know, as they come across it. So like, but they've been told by somebody, you can't do this or you can't do that. Um, that's where we could come in and say, well, now you can because Crystal reports can do about anything. I would say so. You're not limited.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's awesome. I think it's great that someone has filled that gap, brought Crystal into Acumatica. Definitely something I was wondering if anyone would do at some point. So I'm glad we connected, and now people know, if anyone's listening to this, that this is doable, and you can just reach out to Chris, find out more about it.
Great.
Any other thing you wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
I think we covered most of it. I think most of it is it's more of a. I think people need to kind of see it how it works, and they probably don't want to believe it, but it really does. It does work, so they can actually incorporate Crystal reports into Acumatica seamlessly. As far as the users know, like there's no difference. They just click on run and you're good to go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today and telling us about it.
No, well, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of ogforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.